Picture this. You wake up to concrete mixers destroying a creek that's flowed behind your home since before the Civil War. The smell of diesel exhaust mixing with crushed limestone fills your nostrils as you watch $80,000 of your homeowner fees get poured into what used to be a crystal-clear mountain stream. It's for flood control. HOA President Brenda Hartwell smugly announces from her white Tesla. What this real estate agent didn't know. I'm a retired Army Corps hydrologist, and she just created a ticking time bomb. Fast forward 6 months. Brenda's million-dollar home sits in 2 feet of swamp water, foundation cracking, while my property stays bone dry. The FBI is knocking on her door, and that concrete channel she was so proud of is about to cost her everything. My name's Dale Brennan, 58 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought the biggest threat to my sanity was finding carburetor parts for a 1972 Harley Sportster. Turns out the real threat was an HOA board president who confused a real estate license with a PhD in hydroengineering. I inherited my grandfather's 2-acre slice of paradise in what used to be rural Colorado. My grandfather William Brennan was a combat engineer who survived Normandy and came home to build something beautiful. This creek was his therapy. Every morning for 3 years since retiring from the Army Corps of Engineers, I'd follow the same ritual. Coffee on the back porch, listening to Cottonwood Creek babble over smooth granite stones, the scent of motor oil from my workshop mixed with wet willow bark. Martha, my wife of 26 years, teaches 4th grade and has the patience of a saint. Our kids scattered like tumbleweeds. Jessica's saving lives as a trauma nurse in Portland. Mike's debugging software in Austin. What made our property special wasn't the 1950s ranch house or my cluttered workshop. It was 400 yards of creek with water rights dating to 1873. Older than Colorado statehood, and definitely older than suburban princesses with attitude problems. Then came Willowbrook Estates, sprouting around us like expensive mushrooms after rain. 47 homes, average price $900,000. Mostly California refugees fleeing their own HOA disasters. Enter our villain, Brenda Hartwell, 52, HOA board president and self-appointed empress of suburban perfection. Fresh from Moraine County with that particular blend of entitlement and ignorance that only comes from selling overpriced houses. White Tesla, vanity plates reading sold for you. And those pearl earrings she wore like battle armor. The first shot came on a Tuesday morning. Official HOA violation notice, certified mail. Unsightly storage of automotive parts visible from neighboring properties violates community aesthetic standards. Fine, $200 per day until compliance achieved. Here's what Brenda's expensive lawyers missed. My property predates their HOA by 80 years. Grandfather's deed included mineral rights, water rights, and a grandfathered exemption from future development restrictions. The face-to-face meeting went exactly as you'd expect. Brenda's office reeked of vanilla candles and entitlement. She suggested with that practiced smile that I might be happier, somewhere with more flexible property standards. Translation, somewhere poor people belong. I responded with a certified letter explaining that HOA covenants don't apply to grandfathered properties. Basic real estate law. Her retaliation was swift and expensive. Anonymous complaints to the county about illegal business operations. Building inspector crawled through my workshop for 2 hours, found nothing wrong. Still cost me $1,200 in lawyer fees. But that was just Brenda testing the waters. The real insanity started when she discovered my water rights. In Colorado, water means power. Spring snow melt was running heavy that year, and Cottonwood Creek sang louder than usual. That's when Brenda hired Peton and Associates, a Denver law firm specializing in environmental property disputes. Their strategy was elegant in its ruthlessness. File a nuisance water flow complaint, claiming my property created dangerous runoff threatening those precious million-dollar homes downstream. The legal papers arrived thick as a Denver phone book. 57 pages demanding I fund a $50,000 environmental impact study. Here's something I learned during 30 years with the Army Corps. Lawyers love complicated environmental regulations because they assume regular people won't understand them. They base their entire complaint on watershed maps from 1967, before half the subdivisions upstream existed. I called my old colleague Pete Morrison at the Colorado Water Authority. Took him exactly 10 minutes to spot what they'd missed. Dale, Pete chuckled. These maps show creek behavior that hasn't existed since Nixon was in office. This is going to be embarrassing for them. The modern geological data told a completely different story. Far from causing problems, my section of creek actually prevented flooding by creating natural retention during spring runoff. Those granite boulders grandfather positioned weren't just decorative. The old combat engineer had built a flood control system before most people knew what the term meant. Monday morning, I filed my own complaint with the county, demanding that Brenda's group pay for a proper environmental assessment since their legal harassment was based on fraudulent data. The county water commissioner took one look at my documentation and started laughing. "Mr. Brennan, these people just tried to lecture a hydrologist about water flow using maps from the Johnson administration." 2 weeks later, complete vindication. The county sided with me on every point and officially validated my historical water rights. The local newspaper ran the story. HOA challenges century-old water rights, loses spectacularly. Neighbors started appearing at my workshop with their own Brenda horror stories. You'd think losing would teach someone humility. You'd be wrong. 3 weeks later, Brenda called an emergency HOA board meeting during our planned vacation to Portland. The meeting notice got sent to our old address, ensuring we couldn't object to whatever fresh insanity she was cooking up. What actually happened was Brenda presenting doctored photographs showing severe erosion damage. Pictures that looked suspiciously like they'd been taken after she'd hired someone to dig holes near the creek. She claimed her engineering consultant, who turned out to be her cousin's landscaping contractor, had determined that immediate concrete channeling was needed. Special assessment: $1,800 per homeowner for emergency flood control infrastructure. Total project cost: $127,000. I cut our vacation short and drove home through the night. The sound hit me first. Jackhammers and diesel engines where morning bird songs used to live. Then the smell. Concrete dust mixing with destroyed vegetation. I rounded the corner and saw what Brenda had done to 150 years of natural beauty. My creek was gone. In its place, an ugly concrete trough that looked like a prison drainage ditch. Clear mountain water that used to dance over smooth stones now flowed through an 18-inch deep gray channel. They'd buried grandfather's carefully positioned boulders under tons of concrete, destroying fish spawning areas that had existed since before Colorado was a state. But here's the thing about being a hydrologist. You learn to think like water. And water always finds the truth eventually. I spent the next week documenting everything. More importantly, I researched Pinnacle Construction, the company that had done the work. They had quite the track record. 3 EPA violations in 5 years, $75,000 in fines for unauthorized waterway modifications. Any significant modification to a natural waterway requires approval from county, state, and EPA. Brenda's crew had skipped all 3. The Clean Water Act doesn't mess around. I'd seen cases where violators face $25,000 per day in fines, federal level. Colorado could add another $10,000 daily. Every day that concrete stayed in place was another $35,000 in potential fines. I filed complaints with every agency that had jurisdiction. Then I called the local Trout Unlimited chapter, whose president nearly had a stroke when I described the spawning area destruction. "Mr. Brennan, this is exactly the kind of habitat destruction we've been fighting for 20 years. Within 10 days, I had 3 separate government agencies investigating, an environmental law clinic offering free legal representation, and enough documentation to bury Peton and Associates in their own paperwork. But Brenda wasn't finished planning full flood control that would concrete the entire creek. That's when I found grandfather's engineering files. A folder marked Willowbrook Development Consultation 1973. Inside, a complete hydrological analysis warning against concrete channeling in this exact location. His calculations were prophetic. Concrete channeling would eliminate natural flood absorption, directing 100% of spring runoff toward downstream development during heavy snow melt years like this one. The result would be catastrophic foundation flooding for homes built in the natural floodplain, exactly where Brenda's house sat. The psychological warfare escalated. My workshop got vandalized, vintage motorcycle parts scattered, my restored Harley tipped over with sugar in the gas tank. But the security cameras caught everything, including a white Tesla picking up the vandals at 2:17 a.m. Anonymous reviews bombing Martha's tutoring business. Someone created fake social media accounts claiming I'd been dishonorably discharged for mental instability. The school principal called Martha in for concerned conversation about her husband's increasingly erratic behavior. But engineers document everything. Every threat, every act of vandalism went into files that impressed federal investigators, because that's exactly what they'd become. Agent Lisa Park from the FBI's white-collar crime unit opened a formal investigation into HOA financial fraud. Agent Tom Rodriguez from EPA's Criminal Enforcement Division was building a case around environmental violations. Sarah Olivia, a third-year environmental law student, had taken my case as her senior thesis project. She discovered the concrete project that cost homeowners $127,000 was worth maybe $40,000. The remaining $87,000 had disappeared into consulting fees and emergency contractor premiums that all led back to companies with suspiciously familiar names: Hartwell Property Consulting, Willowbrook Environmental Solutions. Brenda wasn't just destroying my creek. She was robbing her neighbors blind. Edwin Kowalski, the one board member who'd voted against the concrete project, brought me a digital recording of the secret meeting. Brenda's voice clear as mountain water, explaining the real goal wasn't flood control, but driving out incompatible residents who don't understand our community vision. Meanwhile, spring snow melt was accelerating. Weather Service issued flood watches for the entire Front Range. Cottonwood Creek was running at 150% of normal flow, and peak conditions were still weeks away. The concrete channel was concentrating 100% of flow into a narrow high-pressure stream aimed directly at HOA homes. Dr. Rodriguez from Colorado State ran computer simulations showing that during peak flood, water velocity would reach levels capable of undermining foundation stability. The call came at 5:23 a.m. on March 15th, Edwin whispering like espionage. "Dale, Brenda is packing moving truck. Middle of night. Very suspicious." Sure enough, a commercial truck sat in her driveway while she supervised loading expensive furniture, Tesla-packed with personal items. But not before one final desperate gambit. Sarah called with news that made my coffee taste like battery acid. Brenda had filed for an emergency restraining order claiming I'd been stalking her family and making terrorist threats. According to her sworn affidavit, I was a disgruntled military veteran conducting surveillance and threatening to sabotage community infrastructure. She'd included photographs of me taking water flow measurements as evidence of suspicious reconnaissance. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the same day as peak spring snow melt. Brenda was trying to tie up the legal system until after flood season, so there wouldn't be witnesses to document what happened to those homes. The federal courthouse in Denver was packed on March 22nd. Judge Martha Blackwood, whose reputation for environmental law enforcement made corporate lawyers sweat, presided over what media dubbed the Creek War trial. Kate Morrison's opening statement was surgical. "Your Honor, this case represents systematic destruction of a century-old ecosystem to satisfy one woman's personal vendetta." Then Kate played the recordings. The courthouse went dead silent as Brenda's voice filled the room, offering bribes and threatening Martha's career. Gasps from the gallery when the secret HOA meeting recording revealed her true motivations. My testimony was straightforward. I showed the judge grandfather's 1973 engineering report predicting exactly what would happen. Computer animations demonstrated how the channel directed 400% more water toward HOA homes during peak flow. But the real drama came when Dr. Rodriguez presented real-time flood monitoring data. Creek flow was approaching record levels while we sat in court. The judge called recess when the National Weather Service issued a flash flood emergency for our area. When we reconvened, Brenda looked like she'd seen her own ghost. Kate delivered the moment of the century. "Your Honor, while we've been in session, the defendant's concrete channel has begun flooding the very homes it was supposed to protect. Emergency crews are pumping water from basements in Willowbrook Estates, while Mr. Brennan's property remains completely dry." Live television coverage confirmed the beautiful irony. Water was backing up behind Brenda's concrete bottleneck, creating exactly the foundation flooding grandfather's engineering had prevented for 70 years. $1 million homes sat in lakes of muddy water, while my workshop stayed bone dry on higher ground. Brenda's public meltdown was captured by every camera. She accused me of orchestrating the flood emergency, claimed environmental groups had weaponized weather, and demanded federal protection from my eco-terrorist conspiracy. Judge Blackwood's patience evaporated. She ruled comprehensively in my favor on every count: Clean Water Act violations, water rights infringement, fraud, conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She ordered immediate removal of all concrete, complete creek restoration, and damages totaling $750,000. 6 months later, you wouldn't recognize Cottonwood Creek. Where ugly concrete once imprisoned flowing water, a natural channel now winds through restored banks lined with native willows and wildflowers. The restoration became a community effort that would have made grandfather proud. The sound that wakes me every morning isn't harsh scraping of water fighting concrete. It's the gentle babble of a creek that remembers how to be itself again. The broader impact rippled outward. Colorado's legislature passed Dale's Law, legislation strengthening property rights against HOA overreach. Law schools from Stanford to Harvard now teach the Brennan Creek case as a model for citizen environmental enforcement. Brenda pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges and received 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years supervised probation. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, assets seized to pay damages. The concrete company owner received 2 years and $2 million in environmental fines. But the real transformation was deeper than legal victories. Willowbrook evolved from a gated community of suspicious strangers into an actual neighborhood where people knew each other's names and worked together. The annual Creek Festival draws thousands who come to see what grassroots environmental activism can accomplish. My workshop has returned to its original purpose: restoring vintage motorcycles and teaching neighborhood kids about engines, water flow, and standing up to bullies. Martha returned to teaching with new curriculum incorporating watershed protection and citizen activism. Last week, I got a phone call from a homeowner in Arizona facing nearly identical creek destruction by her HOA. As I listened to her story, concrete channeling, embezzled funds, intimidation campaigns, I realized this fight was bigger than one creek in Colorado. But for now, it's enough to sit on the back porch at sunset, listening to Grandfather's Creek sing its ancient song while Martha reads letters from supporters nationwide. Home isn't just where your house sits. It's where your values are protected and your community thrives. If you've got an HOA nightmare story brewing in your neighborhood, drop it in the comments below. You might be surprised how many legal options you have when petty tyrants try to destroy something beautiful. Sometimes the best revenge against bullies is patience, preparation, and letting nature reclaim what was always hers.